I'm Slava Silva. Welcome to Conversations with Slava. Today, I'm talking to Mariamne Everett, an intern at the Institute for Public Accuracy, presenter at World Radio Paris, host of a podcast Hidden Paris, and feminist in training. Let's talk about your article, Biden, a war cabinet. Why do you focus on foreign policy appointments?
Well, I wanted to focus on foreign policy cabinets because I don't know if you can tell by my accent, but I'm American and British. I'm a mix, and I've been an American abroad for quite some time. And I've been learning about just the influence that the United States has on the world stage. For example, it has military bases in almost every country in the world. And I mean, even if you're not an American, you follow American news very, very diligently. So I wanted to, for example, for the American election that just happened this past week, all my friends, whatever nationality they were following the American election, which isn't exactly the case for Americans following European elections. So I wanted to focus in on foreign policy because I feel like a lot of Americans living in America, I don't want to generalize, but a lot that I've met and know, they don't want to concern themselves with foreign policy. And I feel like this was clear because in the presidential debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the topic of foreign policy was barely brought up. And to me, it's a very important topic because a lot of what America does affects people living around the world on the world stage. And so I wanted to dive in deeper and just learn about what these possible people who could be in his cabinet would bring to the world if he's elected.
You wrote about the possible pick for Secretary of State Susan Rice, for the National Security Advisor Tony Blinken, and Department of Defense Michèle Flournoy. You address, among others, Mrs. Rice and Mr. Blinken's positions on the Iraq War. Why do you scrutinize those positions, and why does the mainstream media not do that?
Well, I think it's important to ask perhaps the mainstream media themselves, but also for me, it's difficult to say exactly who is the mainstream media, because while researching for my article, I actually found a bunch of sources from, for example, The Intercept, which is obviously more kind of independent progressive, but I also found a lot of articles in, say, the New York Times, The Atlantic, the BBC, HuffPost, which I would say is a bit more mainstream. And a lot of these articles actually come from 2020, this year. So I don't want to generalize, but I wonder if perhaps there's more, we need to scrutinize the people who are voting in these elections, because I feel like Americans, their goal for this election season was to make sure that Donald Trump was beaten, no matter who he was running against. And I feel a lot of people do know Joe Biden's record on the Iraq War. And if you don't, there are lots of articles you can find on it. But I think they were like, no, we have one mission. We need to get Donald Trump out, even though he's committed this. And I feel like it's important to scrutinize these people on the Iraq War because it's a war that has lasted for pretty much since I was a young child to now as an adult at 27. It's impacted obviously the Iraqis in Afghanistan and the countries that have been directly influenced, but also people around the world. It means that less money can be put into necessary things like the Green New Deal and healthcare because a lot of these American politicians are claiming, oh, we don't have the money to invest in these programs. Well, you would if you did not have these wars that you were fighting. And I think even though Joe Biden has claimed he regrets this war, surrounding himself with people who were so in support of it, it kind of sends a weird message.
what do you make of Mr. Blinken's argument about the US role in the world? He writes, as you quote, on leadership, whether we like it or not, the world just doesn't organize itself. And until this Trump administration, the US had played a lead role in doing a lot of that organizing, helping to write the rules, to shape the norms and animate the institutions that govern relations among nations. When we are not engaged, when we don't lead, when one or two things is likely to happen. Either some other country tries to take our place, but probably not in a way that advances our interests or values, or no one does. And when you get a house or a vacuum filled by bad things before it's filled by good things. Either way, that's bad for us.
Well, to me, I have a few questions when he says something like this. I would say, why do you think the US should be in charge? In what way has the US done things to make the world a better place? For example, the Iraq war that has affected so many countries. And also, yeah, what makes the US, why should one country be in charge of the rest of the world? And why should it be the US when it's a country that, in my opinion, does not prioritize its people? I feel like that's clear in that, again, it doesn't invest enough money in healthcare, universal healthcare, which is a policy that most European countries have. I have to admit, I don't know about countries outside of Europe. I need to do more research on that. But most European countries have universal healthcare. They're really fighting for free education, for example, for its populations. So in my mind, why should the US be in charge? Why should anyone be in charge? And certainly why the US when it's caused so much havoc and destruction?
You don't accept the argument that, well, it has to be the United States. The alternative is just worse. So it has to be the United States, just as it has to be Biden because Trump is worse.
Of course, yes, I was anti-Trump, but as a journalist, it's our responsibility to present the facts on the good guys, quote unquote, and the bad guys, which is why I wrote this article on Biden. And to me, yeah, Blinken is saying that it has to be either us or someone else, but who to him would be the someone else that's worse? And does there need to be anyone who's in charge? Could it not just be a collection of countries working together?
How does, in your view, this ideology expressed by Mr. Blinken correlate with his and Ms. Flournoy's ties to think tanks and corporations? You name the think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies, and both of them founded the firm West Exec Advisors.
Well, it starts with Flournoy because she actually wrote the Quadrennial Defense Review during her time under the Clinton administration, which, as I say in the article, pretty much gave the US permission to threaten or use military force if the United States felt threatened. And she has just been continuing this rhetoric of the presence of weapons of mass destruction, for example, in Iraq, Iran. And in terms of both of them, they both worked heavily in the Pentagon. Yeah, because they know people in the Pentagon who deal with defense military operations, they can help people who want to get, say, more money from the Pentagon get this money by writing award-winning contracts. For example, they worked with Jigsaw, which was a company that claims to, we try to foretell possible dangers in the future.
This ideology that Mr. Blinken professes, just happens to go hand in hand with his and his colleagues' financial interests. I find it tiny bit curious. And if Susan Rice, Tony Blinken, Michèle Flournoy are indeed appointed, how would, in your view, the Biden foreign policy stand out from that of his predecessors? For example, on Israel, on Yemen, on the general readiness to use force?
Well, Israel, I'm not sure if it's going to change much. It could even get worse because Blinken, as I read in the article, really seems to be Biden's right-hand man, and he's influencing his policy on Israel. As I stated in my article, he has stated that Biden, quote, would not tie military assistance to Israel to any political decisions that it makes, period, full stop. Basically, they're going to continue giving Israel money no matter what bad actions they might take, which I find very concerning. And Rice, as I also stated, she likes to say that she's vocally against Israel, but her actions speak otherwise. She's very happy to cozy up to AIPAC, and she even takes steps to go against the Palestinian people's, just against the Palestinian people in general. She was very happy about vetoing a UN resolution that would deem Israeli settlements illegal that were on Palestinian land. And she also was very dismissive of the Goldstone report, believing that he was biased against Israel. So, like I said, I think it's not going to change much. If anything, maybe get worse, as in their favorable treatment of Israel over Palestine. And in regards to Yemen, as I say as well in the article, Flournoy, she's made it very clear that she's okay selling weapons to the Saudis in this ongoing Yemen conflict. She was pretty much the only one on the board to say, no, we should keep selling them, but with a few certain exceptions, because she feels the Saudis have a right to defend themselves. And I think this is very damning because Biden has claimed that he's against this Yemen conflict and that he regrets his decision on voting for the Iraq war. But surrounding himself with people who supported the Iraq war at the time, and someone like Flournoy who is supporting the Saudis against the Yemenis, well, to me, again, it doesn't bode well. It shows that he's okay with keeping these people around. And even though he claims he wants to stop supporting Saudi Arabia in this Yemen conflict, he can't just pull out the US troops. He has to decide that he's not going to supply them with weapons or anything. It has to be a full pullout.
So it looks rather pessimistic.
Well, on the side of foreign policy, like I said, I am no expert. I have only been doing what journalists do, which is look at these people's records. For all I know, they could decide to change their minds tomorrow and have a fresh new leaf. But the idea that you're keeping around these people who supported a war which has been so disastrous, when on the other hand you had candidate Bernie Sanders who was against it, to me that's very bad. It kind of fuels the military industrial complex, and yeah, it could lead to more new wars or just continuous wars at a time when we should be focusing on domestic policy. In that, by domestic policy, I mean Green New Deal, healthcare, education, helping the actual American people instead of putting all this money into wars that don't make the world a better or safer place.